welcome to Living Light. It's first day of December, and officially now hurricane season is over in Florida. Of course, we know what happened to all the hurricanes. They went east and they went west, and nothing went up through the Gulf of Mexico, even though it was considered one of the most active hurricane seasons in the Caribbean. How odd. But, you know, when you have to protect what's brewing in the Gulf and what they're creating in there with all their nice little synthetic genome bacterium and viruses, bacteriophages, and things like that, well, you know, got to keep it from spreading until you're done creating whatever it is you're creating or eating up whatever you're supposed to eat up. Well, that's just the way things are. That's how it works. Anyway, great to have you listening in. And like I said, it's December 1st, and I'm hearing it's really cold in Europe and southern England, and my friends in Germany are going, whoa, what's all this Norwegian weather floating in? So I have a friend north of Hamburg, and yeah, they're kind of cold, but they're cold anyway. They get that wind come off that northern sea. My gosh. Yeah, I've been there one time in the winter, and not volunteering to go back with that breeze that goes right through a leather jacket. Anyway, again, great to have you with us today. This is Living Light, and I'm Michael Edward, and I'm the host for today. Well, this is a Gulf update. Whole different change from yesterday's show. Yesterday was a very strong spiritual show about unconditional love, and I really encourage everyone, go download it. It's in the archives as the 30th of November show, but I think it has no time limitations, so I didn't announce what day it was on the show for a reason, but it is there. You can find that on worldvisionportal.org within WVPRadio section, or you can find it right here on Blog Talk Radio and in our section WVP. So anyway, today's an update on the Gulf. I have just posted today a video from BBC Two that was apparently filmed from best I can figure, early September. And what it does is it pretty much admits what I've been saying since August, but it's nice to have them slip up and admit about new microbiology being used in the Gulf of Mexico. What it is, in fact, you can find it on YouTube, though, youtube.com/WVPRadio. And you'll see it right there on our channel on YouTube. And you can also find that on our site, worldvisionportal.org. And just look in there in the Gulf of Mexico, you'll see it. Here's what they said. Let me give you background. It was a interview done by BBC Two. And the name of the interview was called Has the Oil Really Gone? And the reporter for BBC was Stephen Fry. And this was part of the Great American Oil Spill. And I guess it's been somewhat of a series on BBC. I'm not sure, but on Sunday, November 7th at 10 in the evening, is when it was broadcast throughout most of the UK, and it was a 1-hour broadcast, but I have a snip of about 15 seconds of an interview that they had made, and it kind of took me by surprise. I found this. I was doing a search on YouTube, and I can't even remember exactly what Gulf of Mexico type BP search words I had, but I was about ready to give up. I had scrolled through 2 pages already, almost 2 pages of all sorts of videos that I'd seen already, and this one was on the bottom. And just, last thing, I opened it up and it kind of really shocked me, that to say the least. So let me tell you what was said during this interview. In fact, I'm going to go pull it up now so I can remember everything that's written in there. And this, like I said, was on a BBC broadcast, and it was Mike Utsler, Utsler, is the one who's being interviewed, the BP person who's being interviewed by the BBC. And Mike Utsler is the Chief Operating Officer of BP's Gulf Coast Restoration. That's basically the Chief Operating Officer, the guy who actually goes out there and oversees all the restoration work that BP is or supposedly is doing with the Gulf of Mexico, and I'm sure that includes beaches and trying to get the water cleaned up and whatever. So that's his official position with BP. And I didn't get time to record the audio to put it on the show, but I can tell you exactly what he said, and you can see it and hear it for yourself as well. Again, that's on youtube.com /WVPRadio. And you'll see where it says BP admits using synthetic microbes in the Gulf of Mexico. That's what you're looking for. Anyway, here's what he said. There is a new form of microbiology that is attacking this plume, he was referring to the oil plume, and using it as a food source. I thought that was quite an odd choice of words. First of all, a new form of microbiology. Let me tell you how science works when you're speaking of microorganisms. Anytime a microorganism is discovered that's not in the library, so to speak, or in the textbooks, it's considered a new form of microorganism. Now, they have a library, they call it, and that's their terminology, the scientists. They have a library of all known species and variants even of different microorganisms. So here, this is now the second time. We had Terry Hazen who said that there was a new species of microorganism that was eating up the oil, and that was back in August. So now here we have a BP official, actually not just an official. This guy is the Chief Operating Officer of BP's Gulf Coast Restoration. So this is a guy in the know. This is not just some worker out there on the beach. This is the guy who is in charge of everybody who's supposedly cleaning up the beach, or those who actually are trying, because it's a useless effort. It's not going to happen. It's not going to work. It's just cover up, put new sand on old, pull some oil out and find new all over the place. So that's the real story of what's going on. Regardless of what all the mainstream media is, putting up there, things haven't changed. Anyway, so this is a guy who really is in charge. And he says there's a new form of microbiology. Well, all the known forms are in the library, so to speak. And that's the term the scientists use that are microbiologists. They have a library where DNA and RNA, it's all in there. There's even a government site that has all the RNA sequences of all the known things with the proper name. And, of course, the names are based on Latin off of previous species, and they'll put in a name like Antarctica in there if it was found in Antarctica. So there's their library. And now what he admits, just like Terry Hazen, the microbiologist in California, said in August, and this is all in my articles on World Vision Portal already, all the references, you can go look it up for yourself. He says, a new form of microbiology. So it's something that's not in a library, it's a new form. Well, the new forms that are out there, it's not like they haven't had a chance to figure out what is all over the Gulf of Mexico when it comes to microbiology. But now we have a new form that is specifically eating up the oil. And this is really nothing new in that sense. They've been saying that since August, that it's eating up the oil. Well, I thought the terminology that Mike Utzler, the chief operating officer, said, that not just a new form of true microbiology, but he said it's attacking the oil plume. Now, either that was just an odd word for him to use, or he really meant it was attacking it. And he was very excited about saying it. Go look on the video yourself. I've got a 15-second snip that I put on that video that came out of the original BBC 2 broadcast. And listen to it a couple times. He's very excited and very happy to say that we've got a new form of microbiology being used. Well, a new form like that is not the same as the past microbiology that everybody's aware of. There is such a thing as recombinant DNA, where they take DNA from one type of microorganism and combine it with another. It's a very difficult process. It takes time to split the genes and pull out that gene and put it in with that, and that's called DNA recombinant microbiology. But he wasn't referring to that. So those things that are known, he was not referring to. He said a new form, just as Terry Hazen said a new species was eating up the oil. Well, these are new things. The only thing that is new is synthetic microbiology. And by that, I mean using as Synthetic Genomics Incorporated, and lots of other private companies are doing the same thing, of using synthetic genomics. In other words, the gene makeup. Synthetic Genomics Incorporated, that company, in May came out and said that they were able to computer design an RNA sequence, and then it was introduced into a previous natural bacteria, and their computer design RNA sequence overtook the DNA, or the real genetics of that bacteria, and reproduced itself. So what that was a constant reproducing synthetic genome bacteria. Now, lots of people with the articles that I publish keep saying that it's Cynthia, which was the one that they announced back in May. What is in the Gulf is not Cynthia. And I think this is part of BP's plan to put people all over the internet to comment on my articles simply to say, oh, it's Cynthia, it's Cynthia. And I see it all over the internet. No, what is in the Gulf of Mexico is not Cynthia. Cynthia was a specific bacteria created in the lab and announced in May by Craig Ventnor of JCVI and Synthetic Genomics Incorporated. And what is in the Gulf is not Cynthia. It might be Cynthia's cousin or a remote relative, but it is not Cynthia. So if any more of the BP shills want to throw that up as comments all over the internet where my articles are featured about this, now we've got it out in the open. So if you see somebody call it specifically Cynthia, that's misleading. And if you read my articles, you'll find I don't call what is in the Gulf Cynthia. I give a background about how Cynthia was created, the one that was announced by Craig Ventnor. So just read what I wrote and don't jump to conclusions. Now, what we do have in the Gulf, you have, I'm going to read the article that has been up for a while that is basically blacklisted by even those places on the internet who call themselves non-mainstream media. It was sent to all of them, and hardly anybody wanted to touch this. And that's why I called it The Walking Dead, Part 1. I just changed the name of it because apparently, I guess they don't like the term Walking Dead. So it was also said that it was the source of the Gulf Blue Plague, the BP. Blue Plague, BP, yeah. So now I've just changed the name of the article to the source of the Gulf Blue Plague. Now, this came out November 19th, and nobody wants to touch it. And the reason is because it's just too hard to disprove, I guess. So let me go over that article because I haven't done that on the radio show yet. And now with this video admitting about the new form of microbiology that's attacking the plume of oil, where BP admits that, well, here's your new form of microbiology. This is not a known form, and all known forms have been natural up until the announcement in May of a synthetic form. So now we have lots of synthetic forms. And let me just, before I get on the article, let me say this. Here's the thing about this new science of synthetic genomics when it comes to how it's being handled. All right, you know most things, and there are international treaties. Most countries have their own regulations. Whenever you're involved with everything from an oil well that you're wanting to dig to whatever, there's a lot of government regulation, and especially when it comes to medical matters or pharmaceuticals or how a doctor can and can't do, and everything has to be approved. Everything. It has to go on almost everything has to go through public hearings. Has to be approved in one way or the other. Different agencies of different governments are involved, and international treaties are made when all the governments get together. So why hasn't that happened when it comes to synthetic genomics and using synthetic or basically designer synthetic enhanced creating those type of organisms? It's not. There are guidelines. That's it. Just guidelines. And here's where the problem lies. Anything dealing with synthetic genes, the genetic makeup, anything dealing with that when it's artificial, it all depends on the honesty and the integrity of whoever creates or alters the genome or the genetic makeup. For example, and I was on a show with a scientist, can't remember his last name now, but it was Lauren. He was a microbiologist, and he was working with genetically modified organisms, GMO foods. And as he said it, there are supposed to be markers within anything that they alter or create. Okay, thanks, Liz. It's Lauren Pang. Okay, this is the scientist I was referring to. I don't know what I do without you, Liz. Anyway, there are supposed to be markers of what they call a signature within any kind of altered or synthetic genomics involved. But it depends on the honesty and integrity of whoever is doing that. There is no law or any regulation to say, as he put it, well, we're going to put marker X within this new genetically modified seed for people to plant. Let's say it's corn. All right, we have genetically modified this and altered the genetics of this particular variety of corn. Now, we're going to put marker or a signature in there and call it marker X, and here's what you need to look for so you know it's ours. The problem is there is nothing that stops him, and he even admitted that it's done. Nothing that stops him from putting Y in there instead of an X, so you don't think that's what it is.
And then there's nothing to stop them from coming up with something new and calling it X. There's no regulation, no oversight when it comes to this new science. Yes, there are guidelines, and that's it. Guidelines. There is no enforcement to make them stick with the guidelines. So it really, at this point, with any kind of altering of genomes or the genetic makeup, or even synthetically altering bacteria with synthetic RNA and DNA, there is no way legally to force them to follow the guidelines that they supposedly have all agreed to. It all counts on whatever that company who's doing that work tells us. The integrity depends on them. The honesty depends on them. Well, I don't think BP and Synthetic Genomics Incorporated have a great track record at this point, and I don't know how much honesty or integrity we can depend on with them. Of course, BP, their track record kind of shows the opposite, where there is no honesty and there is no integrity. So the signatures or markers in whatever would be a synthetic genome in any kind of microorganism or any kind of organism, it's not mandatory. And there's nothing to stop them from calling one thing with a marker something else, or having a signature that really isn't what they have told you it's supposed to be. So here we have a real dilemma. That's why it's so difficult to pin down exactly what they have introduced synthetically into the Gulf of Mexico. But they're very proud of their new form of microbiology, to quote them, that's attacking this plume. You know, up until this incident with the Gulf of Mexico regarding spilled oil, no natural or DNA recombinant of different bacteria that are known, that were natural, have ever been able to eat up oil to an extent that all of a sudden the oil is being eaten up in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, okay, let me get into the article. First of all, I refer you to the article before this, the Gulf Blue Plague. It's not wise to fool Mother Nature. That has had a lot of people see our video with that, as well as here on World Vision Portal. So there's the background for what I'm going to tell you right now. So make sure you read that if you want to understand this article. And again, this came out the 19th and it's been blacklisted everywhere. So it's time to put it on the radio. What's factually taking place in the Gulf of Mexico in biological and genetic terms is neither natural nor happenstance. The reality of synthetic microorganisms and artificial genomes is not a newly discovered science, even though the mainstream media claims otherwise. Genomic bioremediation. Get used to hearing this term because it's what's behind the Gulf Blue Plague. So let's get some definitions out of the way to understand what that scientific term genomic bioremediation means. The phrase genetic makeup is commonly used when referring to the genome of a particular organism. The study of related organism genomes is known as genomics. So that's the first word, genomic bioremediation. So now you know what genomics is. The word bioremediation refers to the use of biological agents such as bacteria, but not just bacteria, to remove or neutralize contaminants such as crude oil or chemicals. Okay, so that's what genomic bioremediation means. It's studying the genetic framework of oil-eating bacteria, in the case of the Gulf of Mexico, used in the Gulf of Mexico, and that is a form of genomic bioremediation. Now, on May 6, 2010, Terry Hayes of the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory stated it's important to remember that oil is a biological product and can be degraded by microbes, both on and beneath the surface of the water. On August 24th of this year, it was revealed that a team of scientists headed by Terry Hayes had found that microbial activity of and this is a quote, a new and unclassified species. That's kind of like what the BP official said, where he called it a new form. But this is quoting a scientist, Terry Hazen, Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. Quote, a new and unclassified species was degrading the oil in the Gulf of Mexico much faster than anticipated. Now, this was from a May 25th through June 2nd study in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, listen to his quote again. A new and unclassified species was degrading the oil in the Gulf of Mexico much faster than anticipated. Now, you don't anticipate something unless you know the previously established scientific characteristics of what you're studying. So it was faster than anticipated. So they must have had something to go by to say that it was faster. Now, scientists don't make mistakes. They're very careful about especially controls. So he must have had scientifically controlled characteristics as a base to compare what was happening with this unclassified species eating the oil much faster than the control. So that's much faster than anticipated. So they knew what the expected rate of degradation for this, uncategorized genus of microorganism was. And they were able to scientifically measure that specific rate of degrading the oil. So nothing here is happenstance about it. This was a scientific study. So they knew what the microorganism was, even though it wasn't officially yet classified. That's not reading between the lines. That's reading exactly what he said. A new and unclassified species was degrading the oil in the Gulf of Mexico much faster than anticipated. It was new and unclassified. This is a microbiologist speaking. Hazen should really know, and he is considered tops in the field of studying around the world oil spill sites. He's a leader of the Ecology Department and Center for Environmental Biotechnology at Berkeley Labs Earth Sciences Division. Now, he conducted this Gulf of Mexico research under an existing grant he holds with the Energy Biosciences Institute, which is EBI for short. Now, EBI is a partnership, and it's led by the University of California, Berkeley, which includes Berkeley Lab, along with the University of Illinois. And the grant was for a specific study of, quote, microbial enhanced hydrocarbon recovery, or in layman's terms, for you and I to understand it, the study of how to use microorganisms like bacteria to cause a greater amount of the oil to flow out of a crude oil reservoir. That's what microbial enhanced hydrocarbon recovery means. Now, would you be surprised to know that that particular grant is exclusively funded by a $500 million United States dollar 10-year grant from British Petroleum? So Terry Hazen's results were based on the analysis of more than 200 samples collected from 17 deepwater sites within the Gulf of Mexico. And again, this was back in the end of May through early June. Their research incorporated the use of what's known as a phylochip. And what that is a unique credit card-sized DNA based microarray, basically a little mini credit card sized computer that has in it where it can identify the presence of up to 50,000 different species of bacteria and archaea, if I'm pronouncing that right. What that is a group of single-celled microorganisms. And it can do that, up to 50,000 species within a single sample without having to go to the lab to culture that bacteria and those single-celled microorganisms to find out what they are. That amazing piece of electronics and 50,000. It's just hard to believe, but it works. So that's what he was using to identify what was eating up the oil in the Gulf of Mexico. And the use of that phylochip, they call it, allowed Hazen, and he had a bunch of other scientists and students and such with him, almost all degreed people, to determine that the dominant microbe in the oil plume was a new species. Now, he said it was a new species of bacterium, but it was closely related to members of the Oceanospiralis family. And then he named off, there's one from Antarctica and one from close to Antarctica between New Zealand and Australia. And I'm not going to try to get into those names. So here is a microbiologist and his team. And here, that's what they came up with. This is something new. This is a new species. This is, a new order here. Or, as the BP official put it, a new form of microbiology. How interesting. They kind of have said it. We just let it fly by us, or I guess nobody cared. I don't know. So those two that Terry Hazen said that this new one was like, these are deep water, basically Antarctica. They come from deep water, but Antarctica and close to Antarctica, between New Zealand and Australia. So those were the two identified ones he said it was close to. So what we have is a scientifically confirmed new oil-eating species of bacterium in the Gulf of Mexico that's closely related to a bacterium only found in Rod Bay and the Ross Sea, and that's in Antarctica, and another one found only in the Tasman Sea between Australia and New Zealand. So how do you suppose a new, previously unknown, but somewhat close or kind of related to species of natural bacterium from deep cold water Antarctic environments, how do you suppose that mysteriously and suddenly ended up in the Gulf of Mexico? Well, a hint from that is what J. Craig Venter said, and he's the one from Synthetic Genomics Incorporated. By the use of proven synthetic RNA sequence processes, a new synthetic genome microorganism can be created in 24 hours. And I have seen their computer banks of how they come up with this RNA sequencing, and it's amazing. Now, to simplify things, in this article, I just decided, since nobody else wants to put a name on this new and unclassified species that's a synthetic genome bacteria eating up the oil, it's probably really taboo for scientists to do anything with this. Obviously, there's a cover-up, and obviously there's a lot of power behind the cover-up, so I can't blame any scientists for not coming out with it. They would be destroyed as far as I'm concerned. That's my opinion. So here's a new genus that's within this Oceanospirilla order. So I came up with a name for it based on properly how a bacterium like this would be named, and the name is Syntholiaspirae Gulf Mexicana. And I've got that in the article, so you can try to spell it yourself or even pronounce it. What it is. Now, let's go the scientific way how this works. It's a bacteria which is called the domain. It's a proteobacteria, which is called the phylum. It's a gamma proteobacteria, which is the class. Oceanospiralis is the order. Now, that's the scientific and biological terms of how you do things. You have a domain, you have a phylum, you have a class, you have an order. And what this is a novel synthetic genome hydrocarbonoclastic marine bacterium currently introduced into the Gulf of Mexico. So there, I named it for everybody and described it. Other things about this is that it's psychophylylic, aerobic, gram-negative with polar flagella. They won't grow or replicate in the absence of salt, and they have a preference for aliphatic hydrocarbons, in other words, oil, but other oils as well. And they have a distinct phyletic line with gamma proteobacteria. In other words, they're in line with it. So gamma proteobacteria are a class, and there's some important groups of bacteria that are within that class. Now let me name some of them. Salmonella, which is what causes typhoid fever. Yersinia pestis, which is the plague. Vibrio cholerae, which is cholera. Pseudomonas, oh boy, if I can pronounce this. Aeruginosa, which is lung infections, very much like pneumonia. And the good old, and I know you've heard this one, E. coli, which has a proper name for it, but I'm stopping right there with E. coli because we all know what that is. So, isn't that amazing that what is eating up the oil is a bacteria within this class of gamma proteobacteria? Now, cholera is an acute, and that was one of the things that I named, one of the bacteria that's in this class. The one that causes cholera, it's called the Vibrio cholerae. So cholera is an acute bacterial infection that often occurs in epidemics by spreading in contaminated water or food. The best ways to evade cholera are by avoidance of raw or improperly cooked seafood, which may have become infected by ingesting infected plankton. Remember what I just said. So could there be some infected plankton in the Gulf of Mexico, which happens to be a major food source for Haiti, where there is now, for the first time in the history of Hispaniola, which is the island that Haiti is part of, the other part is Dominican Republic, now we have, the first time, a cholera outbreak. A scientific paper recently released by Dauphin Island Sea Lab shows that a faint shadow of oil can be seen in the plankton in copepods in the Gulf of Mexico. Those tiny animals ate the microbes, or synthetic genome bacteria, the ones that are the new species, that have been eating the oil. The study stated it was important to note that their research documented carbon from the oil working its way through the food chain. Their study states that dispersant use on the surface, quote, almost certainly accelerated the microbial consumption of the oil, end quote, and left little doubt that the oil consumed by the bacteria reached the zooplankton, good old plankton, but they're officially called zooplankton, at the base of the marine food chain an incredibly important food source for fish, jellyfish, and whales. According to Terry Hazen, mentioned him before, many hydrocarbon degrading enzymes have iron as a component. Now remember that. He also states, quote, there's not enough iron to form more of these enzymes, which would degrade the carbon faster or degrade the oil in the Gulf of Mexico faster. So then what would happen if someone added iron and other elements to the Gulf of Mexico? Well, then the oil-eating bacteria they introduced into the Gulf would be able to eat up the oil at an accelerated rate. Sound familiar? But if there was only some more iron, because typical Gulf water has low trace of iron in it. And so does almost every ocean. According to rainwater tests from Gulf rain clouds, iron and other elements are being added to the Gulf waters. Now you can understand why the dispersant formula being used also contains elemental nutrients such as iron. And in fact, there's copper, manganese, nickel, aluminum. We're talking about basic elements that are used in fertilizer. And they're in there enhancing and feeding this new synthetic genome bacteria that's been put into the Gulf to eat up the oil at an accelerated rate. If you want to eat it up, you've got to give it the iron and the other elements. Now, I just saw, and I've got to get it up on the site, I saw it just before this show, this radio show. It's amazing. It really is. Absolutely amazing. In this is pictures that were just taken a few days ago. I've got to get it up there, and I can't see the link right now. I will put it up, and we're going to do an article on it. Pictures of empty Corexit with Nalco, the company manufacturer, labels and such, in Louisiana. And this is just taken a few days ago. And I've got a total blank on the lady's name. I'm sorry. I will put it up there and give her the proper credit. Now, I look through the pictures, and you see, and this is, I do know where this is also published. It's not her site, but it was mirrored over on, Liz, help me out and put it up. Picasso Dreams, is it? Anyway, I'll get right back to that. Here are the typical pictures of the empty containers and oil booms and everything out. And this is on acres. Now, something that was included in there were bags of what looked like fertilizer, and some of the bags were broken open. And if you look at the picture, you will see that looks just like minerals. It doesn't look like fertilizer. It looks exactly like bags of mineralized earth. Now, Corexit is not what everybody thinks it is. They may be using a formula of Corexit, but that's not all they're putting in the Gulf. They're adding the iron and the elements to feed the synthetic bacterium. No, Liz, wrong. It's not Deborah Dupre. She didn't do the article. This is, I'm almost positive, Picasso Dreams. Yes, thank you, Liz. You can see these pictures, and she even has the site of the lady who took the pictures in her blog on there as a reference, PicassoDreams.com. And it's on her an article, Empty Containers of Corexit. And she just put that up a couple days ago, a day ago, real recent. So take a look at that, definitely. Anyway, that is how you get this new introduced synthetic bacterium to start working. That's how you so-called fertilize it, where it works at an accelerated rate. Now, see, everybody keeps talking about accelerated and how it attacks it, according to Mike Utzler. It attacks it. New form, new species. They won't admit and say that it's synthetic genome, but it is, because they did admit it is very closely related, although it's unknown, to an Antarctic cold water oil-eating bacteria. So they can play all the word games they want, except when they come out and say a new form is exactly what it means when you say new form. It is something that has not been established before. Let's not play games with what English words mean. Take them for their meaning. There's nothing here to twist. Now, mutations of that plankton. We've been talking about that. That's how the cholera, the best way to avoid having cholera is don't eat infected fish or crustaceans where they have eaten infected plankton. And then we talked about how the plankton is the bottom of the food base when it comes to the oceans, and especially the Gulf of Mexico. It's a food source. Mutations of plankton. I'm talking about mutations. Were already verified by University of Southern Florida, USF, we call it around here, their scientists months ago. Now, once this important marine food source has RNA mutations, then everything up the entire food chain is affected. That includes humans who consume fish or crustaceans, or even if it somehow gets in the air. Now, all the elements that they've been dumping in the Gulf of Mexico, which bags, empty bags and full bags, and what appears to be in those pictures a warehouse full of those mineral elements. Now, if that's coming up in the rainwater, then anything else that's in the Gulf is coming up in the rainwater. So it's not stretching anything to say that these mutations, and we're talking about microbiology here, the stuff you can't see, then those mutations that have already been verified, as well as the synthetic genomes and any other kind of natural bacteria that might have been mutated, or viruses where the RNA has been changed, where they are normally dormant. They're called bacteriophages. The Gulf of Mexico is full of them. They are normally dormant, no harm to anyone. But if the RNA has been changed, now we got a problem. We don't know what we're dealing with. And again, people who create this synthetic crap, this new science, the ones who create it only have guidelines. They don't have any laws telling them or regulating them of what to do and what tests to do. It's a crapshoot. And we're the victims. So here's the bottom line. When you alter the literal bottom of the food chain within the Gulf of Mexico, you're altering everything from that point on. That's why the Gulf Blue Plague is an absolute reality, and it has been for months. And it is a worldwide problem. And this is why. Wherever the wind blows off the Gulf, and if it gets up into the jet stream, it can go all across the world. So wherever the wind blows and wherever the water flows, it doesn't take much to contaminate a lot. Wherever the Gulf wind blows, wherever the Gulf water flows, you're at risk. And basically, that's everywhere. Greg Hall said, question, how many oceans are there in the world? And of course, geographically, we break it down into 7 oceans, and that was my answer, and I think Quiet Bear said the same thing. No, the answer is 1. They're all connected. So logic does have a place in figuring all these things out. Also on those pictures, besides PicassoDreams.com, which Kelly, she has been great to always put our articles up. Deborah Dupre has also put up the same in Examiner.com. Look for Deborah Dupre. She is a human rights reporter there, and hers is Gulf Military Ops Smoking Gun. Now, everybody is saying, oh, look at the empty Corexit containers. Nobody that I saw in any of the articles has bothered to explain, and they probably don't know what is in all those bags. Just like when we get feed, it's in not paper bags, though there's paper on the outside. It's almost a thin kind of cardboard when you have feed bags and oats and such that you get it, and it's a paper product, but it's very strong. Well, that's exactly what those bags were in those pictures. So go to PicassoDreams.com or go to Examiner.com. I'm pretty sure it's Dupre /examiner.com. Anyway, look for a search on Deborah Dupre on her columns, and you'll find this article in there about the Gulf Military Ops Smoking Gun. Look at the pictures. You tell me what's in those bags. Well, I already know what's in it because the rain test already proved that. Rain clouds coming off the Gulf, dumping all these things. Now, just so anybody who doesn't know it and people who don't want to bother reading my articles where I'm putting these facts out there, that later on when it finally leaks out from somebody high up, it's going to be here on record so that I can say, I told you so. I've been trying to get the information out. I'm blocked everywhere I go at this point that has any major importance of getting anybody to let other people know what's in here. So this new organism that's eating the oil that I have named Syntholia ispira Gulf mexicana has a 90% or higher match to an RNA sequence that I have published on the World Vision Portal.org. 90% or higher match. I know that because it's been tested. So it's not letting the cat out of the bag. It's getting the truth out there. And I can only do whatever I can do. It's the best I can do is to put the information out there, to put the research out there, to reference everything I've got on there. And that's the best that I can do. It's there. And if nobody wants to pay attention to it, then nobody has to pay attention to it. Then you can pay attention to the blue plague when it sneaks up on you. There's a new form of microbiology that's attacking the oil plume people and using it as a food source. BP says so. Terry Hayes, a microbiologist, says it's a new species, unknown. Well, here it is known. I've published it for you. Let's not play games anymore. This is not Cynthia. This is Syntholia ispira Gulf mexicana. It is a different bacterium than Cynthia. And it is the specific bacterium that is eating up the oil in the Gulf of Mexico and is being fed elements such as iron from being sprayed and dumped into the Gulf of Mexico and included with what everybody calls Corexit, which most likely is truly a dispersant with lots of nasty chemicals. But the oil has to be dispersed and fed so that these bacterium can eat it. And that nobody denies. So let's quit playing the games of let's pretend it's just this, unknown. Here we have scientists going, it's unknown. Now, if you were a scientist and you had any common sense whatsoever, if you had already identified it as an unknown bacterium that was eating the oil, and you knew it was closely related to a certain natural bacteria that is found in Antarctica, Wouldn't you want to quickly take that to your lab to culture it and identify it so that you could have your discovery of that put in the scientific library? Wouldn't you? Well, how come no one has when it's sitting right there in front of you? So since the scientists won't do it, I've counted on my scientist friends to help me with it, and that's why I came up with the name. So it's been a fun show today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. And listen to it again. Go to worldvisionportal.org. Go into our forum. Go look it up for yourself. When you're on the main page, the index page, just click Board Index, or there on the left side, click Forum. That's all you got to do. worldvisionportal.org. And then you'll see Gulf of Mexico right up there in the beginning. And go into the Gulf Blue Plague. And you'll see the video in there. You'll see the articles setting all this out. It's in black and white. If the mainstream media doesn't want to do anything with it, and if even those who are supposed to be non-mainstream media news sites on the internet don't want to link to this, even though it's been out since 19th of November, and I have sent it everywhere. Well, let's put it this way. On the original Gulf Blue Plague is Evolving article, there are nearly 43,000 downloads of it. And that happened almost overnight. I have 1,900 downloads of this article, even showing the 90% RNA matchup. So apparently nobody wants to publish the truth except for a few people. So thank you for joining me today. And am I sarcastic? Yes, I am, and that's just too bad. If you don't like it, listen to somebody else. Remember, be who you were created to be. And we'll catch up with you tomorrow. Thanks.
Welcome to Living Light. It's first day of December. And officially now, hurricane season is over in Florida. Of course, we know what happened to all the hurricanes. They went east and they went west, and nothing went up through the Gulf of Mexico, even though it was considered one of the most active hurricane seasons in the Caribbean. How odd. But, when you have to protect what's brewing in the Gulf and what they're creating in there with all their nice little synthetic genome bacterium and viruses, bacteriophages, things like that. Well, got to keep it from spreading until you're done creating whatever it is you're creating or eating up whatever you're supposed to eat up. Well, that's just the way things are. That's how it works. Anyway, great to have you listening in. And like I said, it's December 1st, and I'm hearing it's really cold in Europe and southern England, and my friends in Germany are going, whoa, what's all this Norwegian weather floating in? So I have a friend north of Utsler, Utsler, is the one who's being interviewed, the BP person who's being interviewed by the BBC. And Mike Utsler is the chief operating officer of BP's Gulf Coast Restoration. That's basically the chief operating officer, the guy who actually goes out there and oversees all the restoration work that BP is or supposedly is doing with the Gulf of Mexico, and I'm sure that includes beaches and trying to get the water cleaned up and whatever. So that's his official position with BP. And I didn't get time to record the audio to put it on the show, but I can tell you exactly what he said, and you can see it and hear it for yourself as well. Again, that's on youtube.com /WVPRadio. And you'll see where it says BP admits using synthetic microbes in the Gulf of Mexico. That's what you're looking for. Anyway, here's what he said. There is a new form
of microbiology that is attacking this plume. He was referring to the oil plume. A video from BBC Two that was apparently filmed, from best I can figure, early September. And what it does is it pretty much admits what I've been saying since August, but it's nice to have them slip up and admit about new microbiology being used in the Gulf of Mexico. What it is, in fact, you can find it on YouTube, though, youtube.com/WVPRadio, and you'll see it right there on our channel on YouTube. And you can also find that on our site, worldvisionportal.org. And just look in there in the Gulf of Mexico, you'll see it. Here's what they said. Let me give you background. It was a interview done by BBC Two, and the name of the interview was called "Has the Oil Really Gone?" And the reporter for BBC was Stephen Fry, and this was part of the Great American Oil Spill. And I guess it's been somewhat sombered, and yeah, they're kind of cold, but they're cold anyway. They get that wind come off that northern sea. My gosh. Yeah, I've been there one time in the winter, and not volunteering to go back with that breeze that goes right through a leather jacket. Anyway, again, great to have you with us today. This is Living Light, and I'm Michael Edward, and I'm the host for today. Well, this is a Gulf update. Whole different change from yesterday's show. Yesterday was a very strong spiritual show about unconditional love, and I really encourage everyone, go download it. It's in the archives as the 30th of November show, but I think it has no time limitations, so I didn't announce what day it was on the show for a reason, but it is there. You can find that on worldvisionportal.org within WVP Radio section, or you can find it right here on Blog Talk Radio and in our section WVP. So anyway, today's an update on the Gulf. I have just posted today a series on BBC. I'm not sure, but on Sunday, November 7th at 10 in the evening, is when it was broadcast throughout most of the UK, and it was a 1-hour broadcast, but I have a snip of about 15 seconds of an interview that they had made, and it kind of took me by surprise. I found this. I was doing a search on YouTube, and I can't even remember exactly what Gulf of Mexico type BP search words I had, but I was about ready to give up. I had scrolled through 2 pages already, almost 2 pages of all sorts of videos that I'd seen already, and this one was on the bottom. And just, last thing, I opened it up, and it kind of really shocked me, that to say the least. So let me tell you what was said during this interview. In fact, I'm going to go pull it up now, so I can remember everything that's written in there. And this, like I said, was on a BBC broadcast, and it was Mike